Chairman, and once again, thank all of you for being here. And Mr. Nassahar, I'd like to ask you a question that's kind of a follow-up for what Congresswoman Shea Porter was talking about with the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and the fact that the Navy has not had a major MILCON project, I think you said, for 39 years there. How does the Navy view that shipyard? Is it a priority?
The Portsmouth shipyard, the Navy only has two shipyards on the East Coast, Portsmouth and Norfolk, and yes, both shipyards are of a priority to the Navy.
Wouldn't you say it would be a critical priority?
They are a priority of the Navy. Yes,
and would you say the Norfolk Naval Shipyard is also a critical priority?
They are both critical assets, yes, sir.
Dr. Robine, thank you for being here again with us, and we appreciate your willingness and patience to put up with us as we fumble through these questions. But we've had a lot of questions about BRAC. What was the purpose of BRAC? Now, in full disclosure, most of us were against BRAC, but what was the purpose for BRAC in a capsulized 60-second version, if you could give it to me?
The early BRAC rounds were...
The last one.
The last one was focused on enhancing military capability as opposed to getting rid of excess capacity, which was the traditional rationale.
So it was enhancing our capability.
Right.
Was that by expanding facilities, the number of facilities we had, or by consolidating facilities, or where was the emphasis there?
I think both. I think the individual service representatives can probably give you better examples, but it was a focus on military capability. Jointness was a major component. I mean, there are a number of focus areas, but certainly consolidation has been a big issue, as you've heard from some of the communities that are suffering from too much of a good thing, but also expansion of the receiving facilities.
So would it be fair to say, and again, don't let me put words in your mouth, I know you won't, but it was designed to increase our capability.
Right.
So we were looking
that was the
at where we needed to increase our capabilities and the needs we had to increase those capabilities. Consolidation, not for consolidation's sake, I would take it, but for the purpose of increasing our capability and perhaps efficiencies.
Right.
And then jointness.
Right.
And then also cost efficiency. Fair? That would do that. Mr. Nassahar, you agree with Dr. Robine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The reason I want to ask you that is, tell me why, if we were looking during BRAC at increasing our capabilities, at consolidation for efficiency's sake, at jointness, why was the transfer of a carrier from Norfolk to Mayport not even raised in that process? And tell me what's happened from the time that BRAC started to today, why the Navy considers that now a greater priority than spending money at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard or spending money at the Norfolk Naval Shipyard, or for that matter, any of our other shipyards that have about a $3 billion backlog right now. What happened different?
I'm not sure why or what went through the process of the BRAC 2005 Navy BRAC 2005. The Navy BRAC 2005 was one of the smallest BRAC rounds we've had. We did quite a bit of BRAC in the earlier rounds, especially 91, 93, 95 time frame. So we didn't have many major bases closing. We had a lot of realignment in that during that round, especially of our reserve bases. As far as why we are moving a carrier to...
That's not my question. Okay. My question is, what happened between the time of BRAC, when those kind of issues were being considered and looking at, and today that changed so that the Navy is now considering doing that? Has anything changed in that time period?
I'm not aware of those discussions on what changed.
So then, when we looked at BRAC with our goal, stated goal, Dr. Rabine is, I think, absolutely correct, looking at the capabilities we needed, consolidation that should take place, jointness, cost efficiency. Carrier wasn't even on the radar screen, but something happened between then and now to not just put it on the radar screen, but to put it above the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and the Norfolk Naval Shipyard. And the reason I raise that is because I understand from Admiral Roughhead's testimony in the Senate for the fiscal year 2009 budget testimony, he said that future shore readiness is at risk. And we know that there is now a backlog for installations of $36.6 billion. So my question to you is, if in fact the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard is a critical shipyard, which I believe it to be, if the Norfolk Naval Shipyard is critical, what is it that makes spending either $590 billion or what many estimates are up to $1 billion to move a carrier to Mayport more important than funding projects at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard and Norfolk Naval Shipyard, which the Admiral has said is putting us at a place right now where our shore readiness is at risk?
We try to balance all the critical needs of the Navy, of the Department, across multiple years. So it's not that we're placing it more important than Portsmouth or...
But not, Mr. Netzer, and I don't want to interrupt you, but if my friend and colleague down here is correct, and I know she would not say something that she didn't believe to be correct, 39 years is a long time to balance or to stretch over years. And when we have this major process of BRAC taking place, where we were supposed to look at all this, whether we make good decisions or not in Monmouth, I mean, you know, that's open to argument. But we all know that's when it was all put on the table. Carrier wasn't a blip on the screen. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody said, oh, let's look at that, not look at it. Wasn't even done. These projects have been on the screen for 39 years. And all of a sudden the Navy is coming up and saying, oh, all of a sudden it's so vital that we do this, even though all the evidence suggests it's a very, very small risk. It leaves some of us up here scratching our head and saying, why, when you said you needed so much money and you got future shore readiness at risk, you can't put a dime for these MILCOM projects in shipyards that you admit are critical? And by the way, in the Norfolk shipyard, which I think is critical, just like I do Portsmouth, you have bumped a facility from 2011 for a controlled industrial facility, while now you want to do one at Mayport. And yet, Admiral Greenert the other day said all the docking availabilities for the carrier were going to be done in Norfolk. Explain why that's smart allocation of dollars.
From a critical infrastructure, we look at, and I'm not sure what happened during BRAC, but we continue to evaluate all the risk to the fleet. And after 2005, it was determined by the Navy that the critical infrastructure, the consequences of losing the only nuclear repair capability was too great of a risk to the nation. That it's not that whether it's Portsmouth, Norfolk aren't important.
Wait a minute. Now tell me, what are you talking about? The only repair facility?
The nuclear carrier repair facility.
Where are those carriers built?
At Newport News and...
Okay, so you're not talking about the only one. You've got Norfolk Naval Shipyard, and you've got Newport News, which is just down the river, so you wouldn't lose them both at one time. You'd still have the very place that you built the carrier, wouldn't you?
They're in the same geographic location that our nuclear capability, repair capability. So from a critical infrastructure, the consequences of losing the carrier, that repair capability in the Hampton Roads area, I look at it from the facilities of, if we were to lose that repair capability in the Hampton Roads area, what would be the impact and how would we recover? It is a large risk to the...
But none of that risk was raised during BRAC, was it, at all?
I'm not.
Let me just say it wasn't. Let me ask you this question. I have a letter here from Senator Jim Webb, as you know, former Secretary of the Navy, now in the Senate Armed Services Committee. And he says this. He said, stewardship of taxpayer dollars demands that the Navy first maintain its existing facilities properly before investing what could be up to $1 billion to build a new controlled industrial facility in Mayport to support a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. You just disagree, and you think Senator Webb is wrong on that, don't you? Or do you?
I think that in order for this country to be able to live with the risk of the consequence of losing that capability in the Hampton Roads area is just too great of a risk if we were to lose that.
Last thing I want to ask you is this, and this is something you're going to need to get back to me on. In the QDR, were any lobbyists involved in the QDR and the decisions that were put in the QDR?
I am not aware of any, but I'll take that for the record.
Would you think it would be inappropriate if they were?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you if you would, and this is based on Senator Webb's letter to Secretary Lynn on December 23, 2009, when he asked for this information. I'm going to ask that you get this back to us. He asked at this point in time if he said if you could give us information if whether or not in the past 2 years Admiral Natter has, let me get his exact wording because I want to read this to you exactly. What he's asked is this. He says that during the past 2 years, Admiral Natter has firmly advocated the Navy's carrier homeporting proposal for Mayport. Unfortunately, press reports quoting his views do not generally reveal that he's a paid lobbyist for the state of Florida and the city of Jacksonville, Florida. In addition to his Department of Defense contracts in the 4-Star for Hire Mentor program, USA Today reported that he's also a defense consultant and a board member of weapons maker BAE Systems. From 2004 through 2006, his firm received $1.5 million from the state of Florida to lobby the Navy and Congress on base closing decisions, federal lobbying records show. This is Senator Webb's letter. And the question he asked is whether or not you could give information as to whether or not Admiral Nadler had any contact with anyone regarding the QDR when that was brought forward. So I just ask, in compliance with Senator Webb's letter, if you would follow up and give us that information if any of it exists.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'd like to go back to Dr. Robine. And Dr. Robine, these are questions I just don't have answers for, just to ask. And if you don't know them, you can get back to me with them. But the President's budget did include more than $1 billion for MILCON in Afghanistan. As you heard my opening remarks, none of those projects are going to be completed by July 2011, the date the President said we would begin our drawdown of forces there. Explain.
Well, I think it's sort of implicit in what you just said. That's the beginning of the drawdown, not the end of the drawdown. As the Secretary Gates has said, the transfer of security responsibility to the Afghans will be based on conditions on the ground. So this is we're not leaving on the 11th. I mean, we will begin that process, but we won't end. And these are facilities that will provide support.
The curbs, though, just seem to be going the wrong direction. I mean, maybe just explain, if you would, to me, you know, we got a curve where our constructions aren't going to be done, and about $1 billion, and we are talking about leaving. Is that because we're just having a few people leave and we're going to still have a large number there? Or, I mean, I would just think we'd want to make sure we were going to have a pretty sizable force there if we were going to spend $1 billion in these MILCON projects.
I definitely don't want to be speaking to our policy in Afghanistan and how.
No, I'm asking you to speak to the budget.
Yeah, no, I think the answer is we start leaving then. The pace at which we leave is to be determined. There are military construction needs for the time that we're there.
Would it be fair to say, though, if we were going to have $1 billion of MILCON for Afghanistan and not a single one of those projects completed before July 2011, we were planning on having a fairly significant number of people there to use those projects, or else we wouldn't be building them?
I would not want to speculate on that.
Would it make
That's
good
not,
economic sense from a budgetary matter for us to be spending $1 billion for projects?
It could well. I mean, we're at war. We're trying to win a war, and Milcon is.
But if we're going to be spending them after we leave that war, that wouldn't make too much sense, would it?
I don't think that's the plan, but I think it is we need support while we're there.
Okay, help me with this one then. The President's budget also, and this I said in my opening remarks too, includes funding for facilities in the United States for Army and Air Force units currently based in Europe, even though the QDR was silent on whether or not the Army brigade combat teams or Air Force fighter squadrons were indeed returning to the United States. If we're spending money here for them, are they coming back, or are they staying there? And if we don't know, why are we spending money to bring them back?
My understanding is that decision on how many will stay versus come here is to be made this fall in a NATO forum.
And I understand that. I'm not arguing that. I'm just saying, shouldn't I know that decision? Am I getting the cart before the horse? Shouldn't I know that decision before I spend the money for the facilities to put them there, if I don't even know whether they're coming back? And anybody can, Mr. Calcaire.
Yeah, Mr. Fertz. I would just make 2 points. We're kind of hamstrung without contingency construction authority over there to respond to emergent needs on the ground. So to the extent that we don't have the access to that authority, we have positioned these projects in the budget. I would suggest to you that at some point, if in fact we did not need them, we would cancel the project. So we're sort of between a rock and a hard place here without the CCA. We had to go down this programming approach. The second thing I would suggest to you is that once we get out of the war-fighting business over there, I do believe there is a value in having facilities there for the train and sustain the peacekeeping mission for the Afghan forces.
So just to make sure I'm clear, we're back on Afghanistan, kind of switched horses on me there. That's okay.
Yes, sir.
But I understand. Fair, good analogy.
Yeah.
How about, are you going to take a bite? I saw y'all passing some notes. I guess you got the last one on it, and that's fine. But tell me about the Europe situation.
Well, the Europe situation, you start looking at it in terms of, business case and the value of relationships in theater and having strategic assets in a geographic location.
No, got you there. I understand that. But if we're going to make that decision, shouldn't we know whether we're going to change that dynamic before we spend money for the facilities? That's all I'm asking.
I think, I am hesitating with a yes or no answer because it is a dynamic situation. You make the best decision when you have to develop the budget at this point in time that gives us the maximum flexibility.
But let me, and again, forgive me for cutting you off. I'm just trying to get an answer. And somebody else give you some more notes. Read them. Take your time with looking at them because this is open book. It's okay. I mean, we want to get, but I come back to what my friend Ms. Porter would say. We're not building something there for 39 years when we say it's a critical need. And now we're saying we're going to build these facilities, and I'm not saying we don't need them. It would just seem to me that common sense would say, from an accounting point of view, that I ought to know whether I'm going to bring the planes here.
And none of our FY11 investments are at risk pending the QDR decision. That's my understanding. I mean, we can go through. No.
Our problem is you haven't made some of your investments. I think that's what Carol would say. And I would agree with her. And I'm not arguing where you're allocating your dollars. I'm just simply saying it is hard for me from an economic point of view when the chairman and I have to sit up here and we have to say, how are we just doing our oversight to make sure we're making efficient decisions? It would just seem to me, from all the economics 101 classes that you have, I would want to know, okay, I'm going to bring these assets here before I built facilities to keep them here, since I could always use that money somewhere else if I wasn't. Where am I wrong on that?
Well, we have to almost go location by location, but, in terms of Europe, in the Army budget, we do not have any investments in FY11 that will be impacted by a decision to pull out of there or to stay. And the requirements that we have there today include some housing at Baumholder, and that's about it.
But you're still not. I'm not questioning assets that or investments you've made before or decisions you've made where you're not spending money. I'm saying, am I not right that the president's budget does include funding for facilities in the United States for Army and Air Force units that are currently based in Europe, and yet, from what testimony we're hearing today, we don't know whether they're going to be returning to the United States? Am I wrong on that? Somebody's trying to give you help back there.
Well, I guess I'm stuck because I know this budget backwards and forwards. The only dollars I know that we've invested in CONUS for projects in Europe were in FY10 at Fort Bliss. And those two facilities are being used by our Fires Brigade and our AETF configuration down there. I don't know of any other capacity that's been built that's tied to a migration back, nor any investment that is made in 11 for retaining. You know, we're kind of in a pause period. So I guess I need clarity on the question.
Why don't we do this then? Because so you don't have to keep passing those notes, and I don't have to get some. I'll give you a written question.
Okay.
You know, because I don't want you to have to just come off the cuff and do it, so that you can just tell me if I'm wrong on the question, or maybe try to get your arms around the answer. And when I do that, also I'm going to throw in this one. The president's budget also includes a substantial MILCON funding for basing the Joint Strike Fighter, and yet, you know, we know that the fighter production has been delayed because of acquisition delays. And just kind of an explanation of that, and you can give me that now, or you can give me that when you respond to the others. You want to point that down to Ms. Ferguson?
That's actually me.
That's good.
Kathy's turn for some of the fun.
We've left you out of some of this.
So I get to join the fun here a little bit. You're right, there has been a decision that reduces the Joint Strike Fighter, but it really doesn't affect delivery of any of the aircraft until FY15. The projects that are in our FY11 budget request are to support the delivery of the first airplane to the first operational location and the first airplane to the second training location, the first training location being Eglin. As we've gone back and relooked at the delivery schedule, the delivery of those two airplanes slips by just 3 months from the summer to the fall of 2013. And backing that up, we need to have MILCON in 11 in order to have those facilities available for when the aircraft comes on the ground.
Okay. Ms. Ferguson, thank you. Mr. Gary, I owe you a question that I'll send to you to respond. And Mr. Natsihara, if you could just get me the answer to that one about Admiral Nadler, if you would, based on Senator Webb's question. And again, Dr. Rabine, thank you again, and all of you for being here. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Sir, I do have a response from Secretary Lynn that went back to Senator Webb.
Oh, good. Could I just get a copy of that?
Yes, sir.
Did it include in there any information on that?
Yes, he specifically answered that question.
That's great. Thank you. If you'll just give me a copy of that, that would be great. I appreciate that. Thank you.